I think it's hugely significant because in the past, the OPCW has only been tasked to investigate chemical attack and to rule on what chemical was used and to confirm it was an attack. And those reports were then presented to the UN Security Council, and the last 10 were vetoed by the Russian Federation. And therefore, they didn't go any further. And that has led to the proliferation of chemical weapons. And we've seen virtually every dictator, despot, rogue state and terror group now view chemical weapons as a normal. The OPCW also voted yesterday to focus on the terror threat, which I think is hugely significant. So hopefully we can now redraw the red line on the use of chemical weapons and move forward.
And how difficult is it for inspectors to determine just who used chemical weapons, especially in a country as chaotic as Syria?
Well, it is a challenge because it is usually the timeliness of inspectors getting on the ground that is important, that they can get all the information available. And there's certainly been strong evidence that the Syrian regime and their allies have prevented a timely investigation. However, the reports that have come out about attacks in Ghouta and Khan Sheikhoun in the last 12 months have been very detailed and have led most of those experts, people like myself, to believe that the regime were responsible. And I think we're soon going to see the Duma report from the major attack on April the 7th this year, which killed up to 70 people, which hopefully will provide all the detail we require and the attribution as well.
Well, there have been few consequences for chemical weapons used in Syria so far. How might this move change that?
Well, hopefully, if the Duma report, which we could see this week or early next week, confirms that it is the Syrian regime using chemical weapons, it might well prevent them using them further. We've seen use of chemical weapons usually to break sieges in Syria. The 2016 siege of Aleppo was broken by the regime when they used chemical weapons. The same happened in Ghouta in 2017, and of course in Duma just a few months ago. We now have 2.7 million civilians trapped in Idlib in northwest Syria, and the potential for the use of chemical weapons there, I think, is very high. So if the UN can take a strong line here, and there is proof that the Syrian regime are using chemical weapons before, hopefully they will be prevented and persuaded not to use them in either Idlib or in Dara, which is also under attack in the south of Syria as we speak.
And what about cases like Sergei Skripal? Will we find out more?
Well, that is to be decided. I think from what I understand, the resolution that was adopted did allow for other cases, previous cases, to be looked at, and no doubt this is why the Russians are particularly concerned and voicing their disquiet over the vote yesterday, because the British government, the American government, the Turkish government and many other governments firmly believe the Russians were responsible for the nerve agent attack on Skripal, and it looks possible that the OPCW might be able to confirm that as well. So there is still investigations going on in the Skripal position, but one can see quite how disquiet and how uncomfortable the Russians are now that the OPCW can attribute blame for these chemical attacks.